We are inside Black and Gold. Week 15, Saints, Giants. More blue coming to the Dome. Steve Geller here along with Jeff Nowak. And man, oh man, a lot, is being talked about, obviously, with this matchup. And we'll get in with more of the G-Men with our special guest coming up in the next segment. But Jeff, I don't know with this team anymore. I think that the line already is the Saints are +6 heading into this matchup. What does Vegas know that we don't?
You mean -6?
-6. Yeah, sorry. They're
I was about to say
favorites, right?
That would be crazy if they were 6-point underdogs. That would be saying a lot. But no, I mean, I think that's Vegas saying they don't believe in the Tommy DeVito story, right? But the problem is, you saw a similar thing happen when the Saints went and faced Joshua Dobbs. So that's what I'm worried about. Is it happens again?
Hopefully, the Dobbs the story arc kind of went, hit the pitfall now. Where hopefully the DeVito story ends up taking the turn for the worse in New Orleans. Now, I don't know.
The difference in this game compared to that game is you at least have several games that you can look at and scout a guy. Whereas I think that they were caught a little off guard by how they operated with Joshua Dobbs, right? Like, so, hopefully that's the case. But yeah, we're going to talk about the Giants. We're going to have Pat Traina come on. She's a host of Locked On Giants. She's been covering the Giants forever, so she'll have some really great insight into what to expect. Also going to pick X factors like always. You're going to hear from Deuce McAllister. Also got some quotes from Dennis Allen, Derek Carr, all your favorite folks, right? To kind of, well, we're going to dive into that. But the first thing I want to talk about is international games, baby. They're upping the total from 4 to 8, which is a lot. I mean, I think eventually you're going to get to the point where every team takes at least one international trip. I think that's the idea, is you're ramping this up so that every team in the NFL has to take one, just like everyone has to play on Thursday Night Football at least once, and now twice. You can play twice. I think that's the idea, is they're going to have an international slate where every team takes at least one international trip, because that's really the only way to make it fair. And it's like you're getting, I mean, you're already talking Mexico, Brazil, Germany, London. And I guess my question for you, Steve, is if you had to take one of those trips, which one would you prefer?
I was fortunate, the last year I got to do sideline was a London trip. So that's easy to scratch that off the list. And I guess Brazil be the most interesting to me, with Germany right after it. But man, get your passport ready, sir. You're going to be traveling soon. Which destination would you most be looking forward to?
I've never been to any of them.
Right, exactly.
Right, I'm not a big international travel guy. I've been to China, but I think you're going to see the NBA in China before the NFL in China. Brazil's interesting because there's a lot of political unrest in Brazil. It's kind of a strange. But I know, obviously, if it's who wouldn't want to go to Rio?
Yeah, I was just thinking more of the carnival aspect of it.
Right. No, I think Brazil would be very interesting. Germany would also be, one thing that I'm always impressed by when you watch these games is like the fans. They're into it. The Germany would be fun because, it was 2 years ago. It wasn't this past season, but it was the last season, 2022. It was the Seahawks and Bucks in Germany. It wasn't even a great game. Like, it kind of ended up being a pull away win for the Bucks in the end. But like a half hour after the game ended, they were doing the post game show, and there was the entire crowd was like still there screaming, "Take me home, country roads!" And I was like, "What is happening?" And it's just kind of fun. It's like there's that soccer, that's kind of the atmosphere you have.
It's funny you mentioned that. The London game, they showed Jason Sudeikis was in the stands, and the entire Ted Lasso, exactly, and the entire crowd starts singing "Sweet Caroline." So that was very cool.
Yeah, I know. So it's fun, and the NFL makes a shitload of money on it, so they're going to keep doing it. But yeah, I think that's kind of where you're headed, is that every year you're going to have at least one international trip. And I mean, you're getting close to it now. I mean, you're talking 8 games. That is 16 teams. With the exception of maybe the Jaguars have multiple games, so like maybe 15 teams. So you're already at the point where half the league is taking at least one international trip. So that's kind of it's just something that's going to be like a fact of the season. We're gonna, in a couple of years, we're gonna be looking at it and saying, okay, how many primetime games do they have? How many Monday night games?
Right.
And how many times do they have to leave the country?
Right.
and how long is that trip? What's the time difference?
Do you feel at all that we could be, and I'm not saying, I don't know, maybe 5 to 7, 10 years down the line, could there be a NFL team based internationally?
Well, that's kind of my point. Is I think once you get to the point where every team takes at least one international trip, then it's easier to do because you've already had that baked into the schedule and everyone already has that mechanic sorted out. And so it stops being oh crap, we have to figure out how to go to Germany, and it
All the
starts
time
being
change, right?
right. Because every team already has like the ability to do that, but I think you have to kind of get that into the just expected atmosphere of a season. And once you do that, then I think you can. And you start talking about like, okay, they're going to have long road trips where they have 4 games here and then they go back, and so I think you're going to have like a sister city situation where you have a team in London, but then they also have a home base in San Antonio, right? Where like it's like, okay, so you got 4 games in the stateside, it's 4 games stateside. So where do you go? You have to have a facility. I think that's where what you're going to end up seeing. But it's interesting. It's they would be the first league to really do that. And so once they do, then you're going to start seeing NBA follow suit and try to do weird stuff. Anyway, this isn't
for the NFL, man.
We've kind of got off track, but it's just interesting, and the Saints are probably going to have training camp in California. Like that's going to be interesting. And it's just going to be, you're going to have to figure out how to travel. Anyway, moving on, I'm curious. So I talked about this on yesterday's pod, the pod that posted Thursday morning. But I'm curious to hear your take. So the Saints, they control their own destiny, quote unquote, right? That they win their final 4 games during the playoffs. But I don't think there's a lot of belief out there that they can actually do it. And I know what I think, but I'm curious how you feel about it. Do you think that it's a pie in the sky thing? Do you feel confident that they can get it done? Where do you land on this, like the final 4 games? We're there. We're at the end of the season. This is the home stretch. Do you think they can get it done?
I would say at this point, from what I've seen out of this team, I do not believe they can go on this 4-game run. I would love it to happen. Obviously, it's still possible. The opponents you have aren't that impressive world beaters, although the Giants are on their own little streak right now. You had the Falcons take a little bit of a surge to take over the South initially, but the division, it's hard because there's still those 2 games too against division opponents. I just don't see him being. I maybe 3-1 to close out the year, but I just don't see him being able to go a 4-0. And I don't think Dennis Allen's team has ever gone 4-0. Well, 1-4 straight, I should say.
They haven't. They haven't.
That's pretty brutal. So maybe he can change that too. And there's a first for everything.
They've won 3 straight before, and I think I agree with where you're coming from there. I think that there's probably 3-1 in there in that team. I don't know if there's a 4-0 in that team. And so, but there is a chance you get to the playoffs going 3-1. You'd have to make it at 9-8. But then that's always seems to be it's like if you get to 10 wins, it feels like you'll pretty much guarantee yourself a spot. And you could say this at the beginning of the season, you could say this at the end of the season. It always seems to be that way. Whereas if you're at 9-8, then a lot of times it's going to depend on the tiebreakers. And the Saints, due to no one's fault but their own, find themselves on the wrong side of a lot of these tiebreakers. So I agree with you. I wouldn't put any money on it. But I am rooting for it because that would be cool.
Yes, I am not all about draft positioning right now. I don't want to talk about draft right now. I'm still definitely, I want to make the playoffs.
Yeah. And it's like, because it's like everyone's mad about one thing or another, but you're telling me that if they went 5-0 to close out this season and made the playoffs, people would be mad about it? See, that's crazy to me.
Well, because the rationale is, that means DA's staying and nothing's changing.
That's exactly what it is. And I don't think, and to be fair, I understand it because I do think if they go 5-0 and make the playoffs, I think DA stays because you don't fire your head coach after a 10-win playoff season. You just don't.
Other changes could happen though.
I still think that you kind of reorder the offensive staff and you do stuff like that. I think you find a new play caller, you adjust. But yeah, I mean, I think that is I understand why people would be like, damn it, because they desperately want to see DA gone, and fine. But at the same time, going into the season, I predicted 10-7. So if they got to 10-7, why that wouldn't be a failure? It would just be
not
like
at all, right?
It was miserable the whole way, but you found a way. And anyway, But so, one of the ways that I think there's a chance this team makes the playoffs is if someone just grabs Derek Carr by the back of the head and like shoves him into a locker before every game. Because
like
I'm pretty sure that this is a guy who gets very comfortable, and when he feels like everyone's friends and on his side, he doesn't play that
right,
well.
exactly.
And here's the thing: I think Dennis Allen might agree with that, because this is what he had to say. He was on Sports Talk talking to Bobby, and they were talking about the fight with Eric McCoy, and I thought what he had to say was interesting.
Coach Allen, everyone talks about, I don't know, maybe in the 21st century, they're a little more sensitive. As of late, to me, it was no big deal. I agree with you 100%. Come on, it's football. You might have arguments with your wife, you have arguments with your teammate. You can't keep it to heart. It's just in the heat of the battle. And you look what occurred between Eric McCoy and Derek Carr. I mean, I thought you were right on here. These things these kinds of things happen on the field. I'm glad that both of them had the balls to stand up and fight. And then I wouldn't read too much into it, and then you just move on. If you look at it, that might have lighted a fire because Derek Carr all of a sudden has 82 of his 119 passing yards came in the fourth quarter after all that happened. So it's all a matter of coming together and y'all fighting for the same goal. But a lot of times when you have incidents like that, I've been part of that on the sideline and on the field. So, I mean, now they got more cameras and everything. But to me, the public tends to make more of a big deal out of that. And I said this in the point after the game. I said, all I know after that happened, we scored more and played better. So why is that a negative? I mean, I look at it and no one is going to pout and, going to hold a grudge or their feelings hurt. I think it's football. And a lot of the fans have to understand that you're trying to compete at the highest level. And my estimation or guess, that it was probably something to do with the protection. It was like, who do you call, the Mike linebacker or whatever? And then I know you're always supposed to block the A-gap up the middle. I know that. You block inside out. So if I'm
Bobby,
just
it sounds
guessing,
like you've had that experience before.
Yeah, hell yes, I did. Exactly.
Yeah, hey, look, obviously you'd rather that not happen because usually when those things happen, they happen out of frustration when things aren't going the way that you want it to go. But sometimes those types of things kind of light a spark under everybody and kind of get everybody fired up a little bit. And I do think we played better after that. And so, look, it's something that it happened in the heat of the battle. You address it, you move on, and here we go. So I don't look too much into it more than that, and I think those guys are going to be just fine. Yeah,
and so it is funny to hear the head coach be like, "Yeah, we played better after Eric, just said, to stop being a moron and throw the ball." And probably more
something between. I remember I think you asked Tyron about maybe those halftime yelling matches or whatever happens to fire up the team afterwards. Maybe that should happen before the game.
Yeah, it does feel like that. It feels like at times this team is just very passive, and they're, and suddenly it's like, just be mean. Go out there and be the bully.
Yes. Oh.
And so I guess it takes Eric being bullied to feel like he needs to play like a bully. But it's funny because I just want to play. And I'm not even going to play the clip, but I did think it was funny if you listen to Derek Carr's press conference. I think he's bullying his own children. What's happening?
I know. Believe me, that grabbed me. My kiddo was just studying for a science exam, and I was not booing him while he was doing that.
No, anyway, he said something along those lines. It was funny because he was talking about the booing, and he hears it, and his kids are at these games, right? And it's got to be kind of weird, but
sure, right.
I think I don't know, from a perspective of how is he handling the atmosphere. I think he's done a decent job in that. It's not an easy situation to be in when everyone's against you. But that's the weird thing. I think he plays better when that's happening. So I don't know. That's just kind of something that it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next few
thank
weeks.
Goodness he doesn't shrivel up and cower kind of thing. He rises to the occasion. That you can say at least, right?
Yeah. So we'll see. Maybe that could change this week. you know, and everyone's like this in the stands.
Hey, oh.
Gabagool.
It's like, this is my freaking house. That's what I want Carr to come out like. It's like, I got to show them that, yeah, the Dome is my house.
I agree. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to bring in Pat Traina, and we're going to go through what to expect from the Giants. It's a really interesting team to talk about right now, in terms of, you know, how good are they? Is it really, you know, they've beaten a couple bad teams, but they beat a decent team in the Packers, or at least a team that was on a 3-game winning streak, just like they are right now. So, you know, what type of team you're going to see coming to the Superdome, that kind of stuff. This is Inside Black and Gold. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller, as always, and we're bringing in Pat Traina, host of Locked On Giants and lead writer and publisher for GiantsCountry.com, which is part of the Fan Nation Sports Illustrated Network. We're getting ready for Week 15. Giants 5-8, Saints 6-7. Not exactly the most thrilling lead-in, but when you look at the NFL, that's basically every NFC matchup these days is 6-7 versus 5-8 versus 7-6. There's not a lot of great teams in the NFL, but the Giants are one of those teams that is playing good football right now, which I think is the determining factor between having fun and not having fun in the NFL. You know, it's Tommy DeVito. It's all of this. You know, what has the last kind of month been like for the Giants, Pat? Because it does seem like it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, it's been almost like a rebirth, if you will. I mean, the Giants season at one point 2-8, the team was left for dead, and then you have all these injuries. Daniel Jones goes down with an ACL, Tyrod Taylor goes down with a ribcage injury, and now all of a sudden you've got to turn to the third string quarterback who was supposed to be on the practice squad this year, and he comes in, and lo and behold, he works some magic, and we've got Tommy DeVito mania going on right now in New York, and it's really been a great story. It's galvanized the locker room. It's absolutely energized the fan base. And here we are. You mentioned before that, not exactly an exciting matchup. Well, the Giants are one game out of the wild card race. All right. The Saints, as you guys know, they're trying to win the NFC South. So you actually have a game that's worth tuning into, I think.
And, you mentioned, obviously, the big hype has been around the resurgence of the offense with DeVito at the helm. But, man, oh, man, that Big Blues defense has been pretty bad. And bad in a good way, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely Wink Martindale, the players love him. They love him for his aggressiveness, for putting him in the right position to make plays, for listening to their feedback. It's like one big happy family. He challenges them, they challenge him, and they are playing lights out. And you can see the confidence building week by week. You've got some guys who are just playing lights out football. Dexter Lawrence, the interior defensive lineman, who's probably, you can make a case for being the best or one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL. Inside linebacker Bobby Okereke, who was their prize free agent signing in the offseason. He's having a whale of a season rather. The rookie Deontay Banks at cornerback, their first round draft pick. Forget about what Pro Football Focus grades say. This kid's playing lights out and is on his way to etching his name as the number one cornerback. So you're getting high level of play from the defense, not just from individuals. Kayvon Thibodeau, I forgot to mention him. He's playing really well. So you're getting high level of play from this Giants defense. And, suddenly now you have complementary football, which you really didn't have from the Giants earlier in the season.
Somehow with a name like Kayvon Thibodeau, I'm shocked that he's not from Louisiana.
It sounds like a Louisiana guy.
Yeah, exactly. But he's an LA guy. So
the other LA.
Right.
Right. The Giants are fascinating, and I watch fair share of the Giants games, and the relationship between Brian Daboll and Wink is interesting, and there's been all these stories that they don't like each other, and I think when you're kind of dealing with some of that in the Saints locker room too, right? You had like the center arguing with the head, arguing with the quarterback, and everyone's like, oh no, what's wrong? But I think like a lot of times people lose track of the fact that it's like these guys don't have to be best friends, but the product has to be good. And you can, as long as the product works, it doesn't really matter whether they want to hang out on the, on Wednesdays and get beers. It's like, is it a good collaboration? And it seems like while it did hit the rocky parts there, particularly, that the Bills game was weird where, they had it at the 1 yard line at the end of the first half and the second half, didn't score either time and lost the game they probably should have won. But it does seem like when you're a player's coach, and we had Jalen Smith here earlier in the season, and I asked him about playing for Brian, because you hear about the players love him, and it's like, okay, but is that just kind of a reputation thing? But do that? And I asked him straight up, and he was like, yeah, I love that guy, which is interesting to me because he doesn't even play there anymore. So, what is kind of your read on that situation? Because I think second-year head coach teams regress to some extent, make the playoffs year one, suddenly you're 2-8. How has that kind of developed over this season as you watched it?
I think with Brian Daboll, the thing he has prioritized is building relationships in the locker room. Because when you build relationships, now you can weather just about any type of storm. Case in point, he has a great relationship with Tyrod Taylor. So you think Tyrod Taylor would have, taken the news that he wasn't getting his starting job back, lying down, the way he did? No, he handled it professionally. Mark Lewinsky's another one. Excuse me. At the start of the season, he was benched and he took the news, like a pro. So that comes from, building relationships, being transparent with guys, not feeding them a line, saying, okay, I've got an open door to you. You come by anytime you need to talk to me, and practicing it. That also comes from, not throwing guys under the bus, for taking the heat, pointing the finger at yourself when things go wrong. So Daboll has done all that stuff with the players in the locker room. Now, as far as the coaching staff goes, a player years ago once gave me a really good line, and I absolutely love it. I think it's applicable here. At the end of the day, you want to have as many guys taking the same cab home as opposed to having, 53 guys taking 53 cabs home. Now, like you said, it doesn't mean that you're going to be best friends with people. It doesn't mean that, you're going to invite them over for a pool party or a beer or pizza or whatever. But there has to be a mutual respect. And I think we could all talk about, people in our business that we come across that we respect the work they do. We might not, necessarily think that they're the type of people we'd want to hang out with, but as long as they, we respect the work that they do and we can get along on the professional level, that's really all you can ask for. So Daboll and Wink, they have two very different personalities, I think. But winning does cure a lot of ailments. And right now they're winning. The defense, has been playing a lot better. As I mentioned, they're not getting blown out of the water like they were earlier in the year. So that has gone a long way, I think, to smoothing over some of the, bruised feelings, if you will, that existed in the coaching staffs.
I do wonder. So, obviously they've won 3 games in a row. Not all 3 game winning streaks are created equally, right? You look at the Patriots, they should have beat the Jets. It should be 4 games when you look at it. They should have beaten the Jets. They should have beaten, they beat the Patriots, one of probably the second worst team behind the Panthers. They beat the Commanders, who are not exactly, a dynamo. And then this win over the Packers, I feel like that's the win where you look at it and you're like, okay, this is something you can build on. But how real do you think this winning streak is in terms of have they turned it around, or is it at least in part the competition that you're looking at?
I think that's a fair question, but at the end of the day, to use a cliche, the guys on the other side of the ball get paid as well.
Yes, they do.
And people talk about, teams should tank. The Giants should tank. The Patriots should tank. This team should tank.
We've heard it too.
I don't think you're going to find very many people who actually play on those teams that agree with the concept of tanking. Amen. I know fans like that because it means a higher draft pick, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a stud in the draft. It increases your chances, yes, but it doesn't guarantee you anything. So, the Patriots, you still had to beat Bill Belichick, all right? His defenses are known for creating confusion for young quarterbacks. And that was one of my key storylines going into that game. I wondered how Tommy DeVito would fare against, the different disguises and funky things that Belichick's defenses are known to present. Washington, the Giants have had Washington's number for the longest time now. It's the one saving grace in the NFC East for the Giants, because they have yet to figure out how to, decipher the puzzle that is Philadelphia and Dallas. So, but I think, to answer your original question, you can look at the competition and say that maybe that was part of it. But at the end of the day, those guys on the other side of the ball, they have pride, and, they're not going to lay down, I think, and just say, okay, Giants, do whatever you want to us. I just don't see that.
Obviously, DeVito's been the talk of the town, like we've been saying. But I still think that the guy that stirs the strength for this offense has to be running back Saquon Barkley, right?
Yeah, Saquon's been really good. He missed a few games earlier in the year because of a high ankle sprain that he had. He's come back and he's basically carried the load. And what I like about what he's doing is basically the coaches are using him the way that we have been seeing, in the spring and the summer. They with more passing routes, wheel routes, and all that stuff.
We know that
they got away from that, for whatever the reason earlier in the year, and then they've gone back to it to kind of help DeVito, take some of the onus off of him. And I sit here and I say to myself, where was this stuff last year? Where was this stuff, earlier in the year? So you're finally seeing that now. Saquon, he's perfectly, he has embraced the role of being the bell cow, if you will. Right. And, he's held up pretty well. So he is an important part of this offense. And it's fair to wonder, would they have the success that they're having without him in the lineup?
So one thing that is interesting about this Giants team, and you look at it, and it's the Giants and the Vikings blitz the most in football, right? The Vikings blitz like 47% of the time. The Giants blitz 41% of the time, something like that. Is that, and it does feel like, there is a calling card for certain defenses. And with Wink, it is, you're going to create pressure. You're going to make the quarterback have to adjust and work on the fly. I think Derek Carr kind of said that he compared it to Bill Belichick in the sense that when you're by the end of the game against Bill Belichick defense, you're just mentally exhausted because you're constantly seeing different looks. And he compared that to Wink and said the same thing. I think he was with Baltimore for a long time. I know Carr played with the Raiders against Baltimore. Is that kind of what when you're looking at this Giants defense, is that kind of the what you have to navigate the most in terms of how do you beat this Giants defense? Well, if you allow the pressure to dictate how the game goes, they have a much better chance.
Yeah, I mean, Wink Martindale has always said that their number one objective is to make the quarterback uncomfortable in the pocket. Sacks are great. If you could get a sack on every play, wonderful. But how many teams can actually do that? Not a whole lot. I mean, certainly not in the time I've covered the NFL. So quarterback pressures, hits, forcing early throws, all those factor into the pressure package. And when you evaluate the success rate that the Giants have had with their blitz packages, what percentage are they creating hurried throws, forced throws, hits, the sacks? You just add that all together. They've had a fairly good ratio in that regard. And that's what Wink looks for. And you're right. He does it through a variety of different looks and trickery and whatnot. And it just seems, especially with the younger quarterbacks who maybe haven't seen some of these exotic looks, Wink just likes to, throw one in there just to kind of see if you're, asleep at the switch.
Special teams always seems to be a factor, especially in these. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think it's wild that the Saints are giving 6 points heading into this matchup. But I know there were some issues at place kicker with the Giants, but since making the switch, things have been pretty good, right?
Special teams on the whole, not really. I mean, happy. The Giants, of course, they had Graham Gano, their kicker. He is on IR with a knee injury. They signed Randy Bullock, who was actually with the team, I think in 2016, I think it was, or 15. He came in after, I think it was the Josh Brown fiasco. Randy Bullock came in. He missed one last week, a chip shot that he probably should have made.
Yeah.
But really, you talk about special teams. The Giants' special teams have been, to me, the most inconsistent unit on this team. You see things like they don't have enough guys on the field, or they have too many guys on the field, or guys aren't maintaining lane integrity, or they're committing stupid penalties, or they're missing tackles. They're not making big plays. Last week they had a muff punt. I think that was the first big play they've made in, I want to say, in a couple of years. So special teams has kind of been up and down for the Giants. And, I'd have to go back and confirm this and look, but you could probably make a case and say that there's been a few games over the last 2 years that special teams, because they fell short, have cost the team a chance at maybe winning.
I do find Randy Bullock to be kind of a funny, solution for the Giants, only because if you go back to week 1 of last year, it was Randy Bullock who missed the kick for the Titans that allowed them to kind of get off on the right foot and win that game. I've never been a big Randy Bullock fan. It seems like he's played for every team in the NFL, and he's always like the last option that everyone goes to. He can make kicks, but it's like, I don't think anyone, when he ran out there for that game winner, was like, "Oh, we got this." It was like, anyway. I'm not trying to be a Randy Bullock hater.
Like it.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan. Anyway, so, one of the things, the Packers game, one of the fascinating things from that game was that the Giants didn't allow a sack. And I think normally you'd be like, yeah, whatever. It's just, but I think the Giants lead the NFL in sacks allowed. I think it's something like 70 sacks allowed on the season, which is an insane number, because the Saints offensive line isn't particularly impressive. I think they're like 28 or something like that. And so what changed in that game relative to what you've seen this season? Other than, obviously Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets, he can move around a little bit, but so can Daniel Jones. It's not like you went from a immobile quarterback to a mobile guy. Tyrod Taylor is mobile as well. He's still getting sacks. So what was the difference for them in that game compared to what's happened all year?
Well, first off, I think some of the sacks that have been charged to the offensive line are not really on them. Tommy DeVito, coming in, and even Daniel Jones to an extent, sometimes they're guilty of holding the ball a little too long. I mean, when you look at their average time to throw on Pro Football Focus, and you see that number is above 2.5 rather, that's holding onto the ball a little too long. So that comes down to processing. And the key, I think, for any quarterback to avoid being sacked, in addition to having some mobility and being able to slide around in the pocket, is you have to process what you are seeing really quickly. So that was a problem for Daniel Jones. I still don't think he processes as quickly as he needs to at this stage in the career. Now with Tommy DeVito, that was a problem early on. Last week against the Packers, they simplified things a little bit. I think they went 1 or 2 reads tops. They didn't ask him to go to a 3rd or 4th read. They were getting the ball out of his hand quicker. And when you are able to do that, get rid of the ball quicker under 2.5 seconds, you are probably going to avoid being sacked. And, this is the same offensive line combination now they've had for several weeks. It's not an all-star combination. Andrew Thomas is really your only true stud on that line, and he's banged up with that knee issue. That being said, you help your offensive linemen out by getting rid of the ball quicker, by processing quicker, and making quicker decisions. And I think that was a big difference in DeVito's game last week as opposed to maybe what we saw in the first couple of games.
Know that Darren Waller is, a question mark for this game. He's being, activated off of IR. You think there's a chance that he'd be able to suit up and play, or too soon for him?
I'm thinking it might be too soon for him. I mean, look, I'd love to see him in there.
Sure.
But I wrote this. I'm surprised that they opened his window on Thursday as opposed to not earlier in the week. Earlier in the week, Brian Daboll, when asked about Waller, kind of implied that he wasn't ready yet, that he was getting close, but he wasn't quite there. So I'm thinking maybe Waller, I believe he was limited in Thursday's practice, his first practice.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking he's going to maybe need another week before he's ready. So I would say probably by next week we should see him. But we'll see how he does Thursday. We'll see how he does, Friday and during the walkthrough. But I'd be surprised if we see him this week.
Yeah, my guess on the timing of it, because it was weird. Typically, you'd see if they were going to bring him back, it'd be on Wednesday. I think it's because they played on Monday, so they didn't actually have a practice on Wednesday. It was like the estimated injury report or whatever.
Yeah,
that would be my guess in terms of why it happened.
Yeah.
My only other question, and it's only because this is a Giants team that I would say doesn't have a true wide receiver one right now. They tried to get it in Kenny Golladay, and that was an unmitigated disaster. And now you're looking at an interesting wide receiver core, but not one that I think many people around the league would say, "Oh yeah, that guy's a stud. That guy's a stud." But who out of that group? And I think I have an idea of what you're going to say. But who out of that group would you say it's like if you're a Saints fan at the end of this game, you'd be like, "I hate that guy." He just keeps making plays.
Well, I mean, Wan'Dale Robinson has come on. Good for him.
Yeah.
He had the the ACL last year, absolutely devastated him, and he's been coming on and he's been working hard, and he's getting into a groove. Jalen Hyatt, their third round draft pick, he's a guy you need to look out for. I mean, Jalen Hyatt, I've spoken to him numerous times, and he keeps telling me, I want to show that I could be so much more than just a stretch the field type of guy. I want to be able to run everything. He's still acclimating, obviously, to the NFL, to the different routes and different assignments and whatnot. But he's coming along, so he's a guy that I know they like. Paris Campbell kind of faded from the landscape. I never understood what their plan was for Paris Campbell, and now he's dealing with that knee injury. He's got speed, and I think he could be a good receiver, but he just never really fit in here. Isaiah Hodgins kind of drifted out of the scene after coming on so strong midpoint last year. And then you've got the veteran Sterling Shepard, who is still, he can still get open and he still plays fearlessly, but he's kind of at the back end of his career. So I would say the two guys to keep an eye on from the Giants receiver core, obviously Jalen Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson. Those two are going to be part of the future of this receiving core moving forward. And then I left out Darius Slayton. I can't forget about Slayton, but
just been around forever, right?
Yeah, he's been around, but Slayton is kind of I don't know if I would necessarily put him in contention for a number one receiver spot.
Yeah, Wan'Dale is like a fascinating guy because he's so small, and it's like, well, how do they use him? And I try to he kind of reminds me of like a Percy Harvin, where it's like you just get the ball in his hands and let him do what he does. Because I know he had a big game against the Packers. I think he was probably one of the bigger reasons they won that game, particularly that last catch down the sideline. Has he, have they kind of figured out how to use him in terms of I don't know if at the beginning of the season they really had a plan, but it seems like the last month or so they've kind of they've figured him out a little bit.
Yeah, I think in the beginning of the season, you remember he was coming off the ACL injury. And he was basically on PUP the entire summer. So they had to get him back in. They had to get him up to speed, acclimated. He had to build up confidence in playing on that knee. And that took some time. So now I think what you're seeing is, he's playing at a higher level. The confidence is sky high. And to your point, yeah, I think they always knew how they wanted to deploy him. And they're finally getting around to doing that. Wan'Dale is kind of like, I hate to use this term because I hate the term, but a human joystick. You can have him run jet sweeps. You can have him run out of the backfield. You can send him wide. You can send him on slants. I mean, you can do so much with him. And he's a good yard after the catch guy. And his separation, I mean, he's averaging, I think, over 3 yards separation according to NFL Next Gen stats. When was the last time a Giants receiver averaged that kind of separation? I can't remember it.
Probably Odell.
You'd have to go back to Odell probably, yeah.
You got anything else, Steve?
No, definitely looking forward to this matchup. Unfortunately, I think there's going to be a lot of more blue in this stadium again. We've dealt with Honolulu blue, process blue, and now big blue from the G-men coming in. I know the New York fans travel well.
Yeah, and this is one of the sweet trips on the schedule. I mean, New Orleans,
everyone looks forward to
what's
it.
not to love about New Orleans? It's a great city, great food, great atmosphere. The people are fantastic. But I will say this, the Caesars Superdome has been something of a house of horrors for the Giants in recent years. I looked this up. Since that building opened, I think the Giants are 5-8 playing in the Superdome. And they've had some weird things happen. Remember the game? It was like 52-49,
Oh,
and the
yeah.
Giants lost that game. That was a
Brad
wild
Wing
one.
face mask.
That was back with the Eli Manning era. I want to say about 2014 or something like that. So weird things tend to happen for the Giants in the Superdome, which I, kind of affectionately refer to as the House of Horrors because,
right.
like I said, funky things happen down there.
Well, it was funky last time with that fourth quarter 11-point comeback. That Saints fans are still reeling from that.
Yeah, exactly.
That game, I will never forget that game. I think it was 2015. And I remember Eli had 6 touchdowns and Drew had 7. And it was like the names that caught touchdowns. Like obviously Odell was there, but then it's like I think Dwayne Harris had 2 touchdowns. Like guys that
everybody was catching. It was like you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown.
Right. It was insane. And I also will never forget the Brad Wing face mask because he was an LSU guy. Everyone's like, thanks, Brad. You had one last gift to Louisiana.
But like I said, the House of Horrors, funky things happen when the Giants play in that Superdome building. I don't know why, but there's a history.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, at least, if nothing else, we'll have a good time. But all right.
Yeah, let's get weird on Sunday.
There you go.
Get weird. Pat Traina, host of Locked On Giants, lead writer, publisher of GiantsCountry.com, part of the Fan Nation Sports Illustrated Network. Thanks so much for the time. And it's going to be a good one.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Appreciate you.
Thanks again, Pat Traina, for coming on. She's great. I know she's covered the Giants forever. She's covered the Giants since long before I moved away from Giants country for basically everybody. So it was fun. It was a fun talk. And I think she got to a lot of interesting points there. When I asked her about the receivers, I had a feeling the first name out of her mouth is going to be Wan'Dale Robinson because he's going to be a guy that drives Saints fans insane on Sunday because the Saints want to lock up man-to-man on the outside. They want to get physical. They want to jam guys, but he's just not going to give them that opportunity, right? He's going to be catching screens, doing a lot behind the line of scrimmage, and then all of a sudden he's going to catch the ball in space with no one around him, and you're going to be like, son of a bitch!
Right.
Like he's going to be a guy that drives you nuts. But past that, like they don't have any real scary traditional wide receivers. And, I know we're going to talk a little bit about what Deuce had to say on the show this week in terms of stopping the run. But it's like at the end of the day, I think if you can stop the run and force Tommy DeVito to beat you, right? The NFC Player of the Week, who probably didn't deserve to be the NFC Player of the Week, let's be real. But he got that award because he ran the ball for 70 yards, not because he threw for 122 and didn't make any mistakes.
Yeah, man, and that's scary, obviously.
That's what I'm worried about. And so if you can't bottle up Saquon, if you can't stop him from running, he's going to be another one of those one read and out guys that Cam Jordan hates so much. Like that's the answer. But I think it's funny. Like you look at these two teams and it's the expectation versus reality thing, right? Like you're talking at a team that started 2-8 and suddenly it's like, house money, I guess. And they're actively ruining their draft pick every week. Like they own their first round pick. They're actively ruining it and the fans are still having a good time. So I just think it's kind of funny. And they really don't have a good chance to get to the playoffs because they're in a division with the Cowboys and the Eagles, and they've already played the Cowboys twice, got their shit rocked twice, and now they got to go play the Eagles twice again, whereas the Saints are like right there, and everyone's mad about it.
No, that's a great point you bring up right there. Is like you said, the team is definitely ruining their active draft positioning, but guess what? They've got a quarterback now that everybody's latched onto there, and it suddenly is like the Mr. I don't even know what you want to elevate him. This story is definitely a huge feel good story. A local dude. It's I love how the Cajun Cannon Bobby Hebert equates it obviously similar to him, a guy that grew up in Louisiana and got to play for the Saints kind of thing. Yeah, just a really amazing story for DeVito. Just hoping he gets whacked in the dome on Sunday, though.
I saw a post on Saints Reddit that was like, so Tommy DeVito is like the quintessential New Jersey guy, right? The paisan. And they were like, well, who would that be for the Saints? And it's like, What are you talking about? We already know who that would be for the Saints because we've seen it happen. He's still here. That's such a strange question. Like, it's obviously Bobby, right? Like, I mean, who else would it be? Anyway, I just thought that was
and
funny.
I know fans are obviously dreaming of Jaden Daniels in the draft, but he's not even a local dude.
Oh, he's a West Coast guy.
Right.
Anyway, but all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back. I do want to hear from Deuce in terms of like what his keys are for this game. We're going to talk a bit more about, the blitzes and all that. And we're going to get into some X factors. Again, thanks to Pat Traina for coming on. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. If you haven't subscribed yet, why not? Go ahead, do it. It's our 100th episode this season, which is just stupid. Like, why? How have we possibly done 100 episodes this season? That's gross to think about. What have we said all of these times? I never have anything to say, yet somehow we've done this 100 times.
You've been a huge Dennis Allen / Derek Carr stan this entire time.
My back hurts from carrying all this water all these times. Man. All right. Stick around, y'all. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. One final segment here. We're going to break down a few things about this upcoming matchup, pick some X factors, all that stuff. But the first thing I did want to talk about, which I think is interesting, and I think is, when you watch a game and you're like, man, how does the quarterback only throw for 37 yards in the first 3.5 quarters? And, it's interesting because you look around the NFL, and one thing that you'll see is a lot of shell defenses. There's a lot of, and the funny thing is, like, you see that you watch it on TV and you can't really see it because the safeties are out of the frame. But when you go back and you watch the All-22, you're just like, well, why aren't there any deep shots in the NFL anymore? And it's because a lot of teams have adopted the philosophy of, we're just going to keep two safeties hella deep, and we're going to say, good luck executing over the middle 15 times a drive, because eventually either you'll get frustrated and throw it into our safeties, or you will make a mistake. You'll give up a sack. You'll get behind the chains. There'll be a penalty, and then we win. And it's kind of crazy, but it's like, it's working. And you look around the NFL, and it's not a lot of good offense going around. Like, like the Saints, I'm not saying this is an excuse for 37 yards, but I'm just saying, like, the Saints aren't alone in that there's just a lot of really kind of questionable offense because it goes in waves, and like the offense now has to adjust. And I don't know if a lot of teams have done that particularly well. And I did think that Derek's question and answers on these was interesting. So let's hear him.
Talking about like some of these like shell defenses and taking the deep ball away, should he change that for you a little bit? Like, can he outrun the coverage, I guess? Or?
Yeah, he can, and he has a couple times this year.
Yeah.
There was, I can think of 2 posts that we hit that were quarters looks, shell looks where, when teams play us, some teams play low quarters, but when Rashid's out there, that safety's usually a little bit deeper. He's more apt to let you have that, and there's been a couple times where Rashid has outran that. So it does change some things where, maybe there is a single high safety trying to take that ball away, but if he gets too nosy with a guy like that, you can throw it over the head. I remember that we had one to Henry Ruggs, just a guy with that speed. They were playing single high defense that we're playing in Pittsburgh. Single high safety didn't get deep enough, and you can still throw that ball over their head. So it's not something that mentally you make a living doing, but when you have a guy like that, you have to train your mind again. Like, hey, if we get that look as a quarterback, I'm not just so quick to get through that.
How much of that is, kind of a modern thing in the NFL where it seems more and more teams are doing that, where they're just like, okay, take away the deep ball, force teams to have to go 10 plus plays.
Yeah.
Has that been just a change you've noticed throughout your career?
Yes, and one thing I've noticed is things go in cycles, things go in waves, because once that happens, there's going to be an uptick in whatever, call it whatever, tight ends across the middle, and as soon as you want to take that away, okay, now those are back. And as soon as they do this, then this is back. The run game will be more, the pass game's more. And so one thing I have noticed is things do go in waves, because whatever's working, people usually draft that way, they go in free agency that way, and then it goes for a cycle, and they see something new, and then they do that. And so that is one of those things, right? It was easier to get shots off earlier in my career, about 8 years ago, in certain ways. Now you can do it. You just have to be smart about it and do it in different ways. And so finding those matchups, finding those one-on-ones, it's a challenge mentally. But That's why these professional coaches, man, they keep evolving, offensively and defensively. They keep stopping one another. It's really cool.
Of course you to be more patient, I guess, when you're going through that, because you want to be doing attacking it deep, and it's just not the right read.
100%, and we, every quarterback, we're not going to make 100% right reads in every game. It just doesn't happen, but you try your best to be patient through those times and try not to force it. Even last week was a great example. They were doing some good things, staying on top. I mean, shoot, we threw, Chris a curl, and the corner was 30 yards deep, and so you wait, then we get our chance and we hit our shot to AT. And so there is a bit of a waiting game sometimes, but other teams, if they think you're going to run it, then you can get those things early. So it's so different every game. I wish I could just give you one answer, but it does change.
Does Derek cut the sleeves off of every gear he get, or does the equipment staff give it to him that way?
That's a good question. Yeah, I've always wondered that question about like Vin Diesel. Does he buy shirts without sleeves, or it's like what happens to all the sleeves? Do the sleeves just get thrown away?
Where do they go?
They get recycled in some way. But yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a question as old as time. But no, I do think like I think that's part of the frustration in terms of why isn't the offense as dynamic as you feel like it could be? Is teams are taking that away and saying you need to be able to run the ball. Like if you can run the ball, you can beat us. If you can execute over the middle of the field, you can beat us. And it's funny because like you look at it and you say, well, why aren't they these big plays? And then you look at it and you're like, well, except the Saints have some of the biggest, like in terms of big plays, in terms of 40+ yard plays, they're second in the NFL, right? And it's just like they don't exist in the NFL anymore. And because so many teams are taking them away.
Is Miami number one? Just curious.
Always number one these days. Like that's but not by as much as you'd think.
Okay.
And then that's teams have kind of caught up to them a little bit because I think their offense has bogged down a little bit in the last couple of weeks.
I just immediately think of Tyreek, obviously. That's why I was like, they've got to be leading the big plays.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And so that's why Rashid, and that's kind of, this was a long way to get into getting Rashid back, I think is a major element in what makes this offense go. And because not every team plays that way, but in a game against the Panthers, where they have this scheme where it's like, no, you need an elite speed guy to get on top of that defense. You're not going to get on top with the, just kind of these very good wide receivers who can, it's like, no, you need to really force them to adjust their scheme. And so I think getting him back this week and hopefully going forward should help open things up. The Giants are a different type of defense. Obviously it's not something you look at and you say, well, they're going to sit in a shell. No, they're going to blitz and they're going to force you to get the ball out hot. And so I don't even know if Rashid this week is going to be the biggest impact, but when you look at the games the Saints have struggled in, like the Panthers on offense, I think not having a speed guy was very limiting in that way. So, and again, I think it's funny because one of the reasons, like if you don't see it on TV, you don't see those two safeties just backpedaling right off the snap and getting distance. And then it's like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to throw it to him? It's like, no, you got to go underneath. And it's like, I think people were like, well, why isn't he being more aggressive? And it's like, well, because you don't want to throw interceptions. That's not better. So I don't know. I think the issues for the Saints is not necessarily being aggressive over the top. It's not being as efficient as they need to be over the middle of the field.
Yeah, the huge thing for me, obviously, with the initial injury report came out, is seeing, Rashid limited and Taysom being limited, and hopefully both of them are able to be in this offensive mix come Sunday because that's huge. But obviously the big concern is Olave dealing with an ankle, and we'll find out more obviously in the coming days. But I just wonder about him, and hopefully he's going to be good to go too. To have those offensive pieces in place is going to be key to make this final push down the stretch, obviously too.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Chris and Rashid don't go, because I don't think you saw, like, Olave, he's dealing with an ankle injury, but it wasn't one that really seemed to affect him during the game. Like I don't remember seeing at any point thinking like, oh, he's clearly slowed by something, he's limping or whatever. Like I talked to him coming off the field. He seemed fine. Obviously he's dealing with the flu, but
At least you avoided that.
I'd guess it's more of a maintenance thing at this point in the season, but we'll see, right? Well, we'll see. Rashid,
that's what I was hoping. I was hoping they had it at ankle, but it was really like, your day of rest kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be just sore, right? Like,
right.
You have to name a body part. And Rashid makes it sounded like there's no question in his mind that he's going to play, so that's good. Taysom is a little more up in the air, and Rashid. The thing with Rashid is when you're dealing with soft tissue stuff and you are an elite speed guy, it becomes a little like that's. If it was Mike Thomas, and that's probably a bad example, but I mean, like if it's Jawan Johnson, right, where your separation isn't your whole game, it's more about being a big body, and I think you could probably work through some stuff. But like if Rashid can't go at that top gear, then he's a different player. So I think that's interesting. But switching sides of the ball, I did want to hear from Deuce McAllister, just kind of going through what he thinks is important in terms of the Giants and how the Saints are playing the Giants. And that's what he had to say.
Cannot let Saquon Barkley all of a sudden do what he's done in the past against us. Like if you look in the last meeting, he had 126 yards of scrimmage. I still remember that game. I was so frustrated. We winning by 11 points with eight minutes and we lost.
Should never.
I go, how in the hell that happened? Dude, you remember that game? I was like, are you kidding me?
You remember the go route that he had, and you never thought that they would throw it to him. He's just running the go route and he catches it. So yeah, I remember it very, very well. And for me, Bobby, it starts with stopping the run. I mean, they've done a good job of managing Tommy and making sure that he's not in too many stressful situations. Now, the one thing he will do that we've seen hurt the Saints is run, and you're going to see some RPO. You're going to see him be able to run QB bash where he's just running it. He's going to pull it. He's going to read the defensive end, and if we're not in position, he's going to run it. And then he will run it as far as scrambling, but it starts really with Saquon. I mean, because if you can get them behind the chains where they have to pass the ball and they can't lean on that run game, then that's not what they want to do. I mean, that's really not what they want to do. They want to be able to play action, do a little bit of RPO, and try to keep the game simple as possible for him.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely, right? Like rookies are only going to play well until you force them to play like a rookie. And when you're leaning on a guy like that, every offensive decision will be geared around, okay, how can we make life easier on Tommy DeVito? And the Saints need to find ways to make life more difficult on Tommy DeVito and make him make tough decisions down the field. The funny thing is you talk about that game in 2021 and it's like, yeah, it's the same Saquon Barkley, but it's like, it's a different offense. Like that game, was the Joe Judge offense. I couldn't even tell you. Mike Kafka maybe was the offensive coordinator for the Giants then. And it's funny because it's just a completely different scheme. But, they're wearing the same jerseys and this is the same Saquon. So, yeah, I mean, he's a guy who he's probably the only player on that offense that keeps you up at night in terms of we have to find a way to stop this guy. And if you can stop this guy, then you give yourself a much better chance to have success. And obviously Darren Waller's an option too. I would be surprised if he plays, but if he does, you'll have to figure that out. If this is I feel like we say this every week. If you can stop the run, you can have a good chance to win.
Like you say, stop the run, have some fun, as Cam Jordan always tells us. That game in the Dome was so awkward. Obviously, you mentioned the last Giants appearance there, and just for the Saints to cough up that 11-point lead in the fourth quarter, I did not think that would be the outcome there, and it was that hurt a lot, and it was a huge deal at the end of the season for not making the playoffs, obviously too. And we don't need a repeat of that this time around because, we know right now everyone is a must win. You want to call it, but I feel like that's kind of a cliche too, because everything in the NFL is must win because it is not. There are limited games in this season. Just sure, we got 17, but that's still a limited amount compared to the other sports leagues.
Yeah, that was also the first game back in the Dome post Ida.
Right.
So it was like there's all this kind of like positive energy in the stadium, and then they completely ended it. Yeah. It's fun. It's funny because everyone's mad at Dennis Allen in terms of like, this is all bad since Dennis Allen took over. But like, a lot of it started in that 2021 season, but no one ever talks about that 2021 season, even though like it just, a lot of things went badly. I think it's probably the Jameis injury that makes you kind of forget about it, in terms of a lot of the same issues that you're looking at in terms of ineffective offense and blown leads and this and that, started that year. And it does feel like, we're only in year 2 of Dennis Allen, but I feel like that season kind of gets lumped into it, even though he wasn't the head coach. But like that, to me, that's the same storyline of like, you go back and like it's all post Breeze. It's not really the Dennis Allen era. It's the post Breeze era that has been very disappointing for the Saints. And you just have not found an answer at quarterback. And I include Derek Carr in that, right? Like he's just has not been the answer. This offense has continued to look just like it looked, like it looked fine with Jameis when they were starting out there, but it was a very limited offense. It looked bad with Trevor Siemian. It looked okay. It looked like an offense that could win games, not necessarily a good offense, but like you pared it down to basically nothing when you had Taysom in there, and it was like, okay. You came back the next season and it just has not looked good since. And I think that's like a big source of the frustration for me is like, guys, figure something out. Figure something out.
The good thing, I'm looking at the game last time too. Speaking about that Giants game, at least Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney aren't there because they toasted the Saints. And John Ross with 77 yards and a touchdown in that game too. It's just ugly all around.
Galladay
had 6 catches, 116 yards against the Saints.
Did he really?
Yeah, and Toney, another 6.
I remember Toney. Remember Toney. I mean, I didn't know Kenny Golladay had 100 yards in his entire Giants career.
Against the Saints, yes.
I mean, that must have been his best game. Jeez. Yeah, I mean, in 2022, he's not even playing anywhere right now. He didn't have a game with more than 30 yards. In 2021, yeah. Wow, you're right. 6 catches, 116 yards in his entire Giants career. Otherwise, his high total receiving was 64 yards against the Falcons, and then he did it against the Broncos. That's crazy. Man, Kenny Golladay. They paid him a shitload of money.
They paid Danny Jones a bunch of money too.
Yeah, but at least Daniel had like he led into the playoffs last year and like was improving. Like Kenny, they signed as a free agent and literally did nothing except for apparently have one good game against the Saints.
That's why he was signed for that game.
That's so funny. I didn't even realize that. That probably doubled his like career total for yardage. Anyway, he did have one really nice block in the playoff win over the Vikings. Yay. That's what the investment was for. Anyway, okay, let's do X factors and then get out of here. Steve.
Yes.
X factors on defense. Go.
Defense. I'm looking at that D line. I think I constantly focus on that every week for the Saints, and kind of excited about Cam Jordan had a tackle for loss in 3 of his past 4 games against the Giants. So let's see that happen again. I need to see. Obviously, pressure on the QB, stopping the run, though, is going to be crucial, too. So a lot of it is on the D-line once again. But I'm looking at you, Cam, to continue your tackle for loss streak against this team in 3 of the past 4 games. Let's dial it up for Cam Jordan on defense this week.
See, I'm looking at Zach Bond. I want to see them continue to dial up the Zach Bond 3rd down pressure package. Because it's like, I've been waiting.
They've discovered something. Oh, my goodness.
No, they just finally started doing what was always the obvious thing. And that's what's annoying about it is like why it's like the Jimmy Graham thing and the Zach Bond thing. It was like, this is what we all knew these guys were good at. Thanks for finally doing it. And so, yeah, I think that's been a really positive development. And I wouldn't mind, here's the thing. I said earlier this season multiple times, I think you need to start paring down Cam Jordan's third down snaps. I think he's a good early downs player. He's still a good run downs player, But in terms of the pass rush, you could be doing better. And I think that's what you've seen the last 2 weeks on 3rd and long. Cam's been out there in terms of playing, but he's not out there on 3rd downs. He's not out there on the pass rush snaps. And I think they've been better because of that. And I just think that's where Cam is in his career. Like he can rush the passer, but that is not where his best strengths lie right now. And you have better options on 3rd and long, not on 3rd and 4, but on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10. Yeah. Give me a guy who can be athletic and chase somebody down. And that's what Zach Bond has been. And I think finding ways to continue to incorporate him in the pass rush is I agree. It's the pass rush. You got to do that. And I think if you had been using Zach more in that role earlier in the season, you would have had more success against guys who are extending plays, the Joshua Dobbs types, right? And so I think that's going to be, I'd like to see him continue to get that, because I think when you can, like, that's the 3rd down efficiency thing in a nutshell. Like, you got to be able to get that guy down. And it wasn't perfect last week, but it was definitely better. And you were putting pressure on the quarterback in ways that I don't think you saw a lot of earlier in the year. So,
although, like I said, it was the Panthers, and our boy Dez over, covering the Panthers, even told us, he's like, "Oh, the Saints are going to get 4 sacks, no problem."
Yeah,
and I was even like, "Are you sure we're not really getting there?"
He had a couple predictions that were spot on, which was like, the Saints are going to get sacks because everyone gets sacks against the Panthers, and if you score 18 points, you win the game. Because that's the thing. Like, when they were at 14, it was like, this could go badly. This might not work. But then the second they scored that touchdown to get over 14, I think it was 21. It was like, game over. It's done. Right. Like, the only way the Panthers win that game is if they found a way to tie it at 14 and then maybe kicked a field goal and won 17-14, right? He was spot on there, so I have to give him credit for that.
For sure. That was awesome.
Yeah, and like, one guy that we haven't talked about this week at all, but is definitely worth mentioning, is Ike Adam. Like, that guy's gonna make some money next year, and he's not gonna be with the Saints. Like, he's been so good.
10 passes defensed on the season, right?
You look at the lists he's on in terms of like cornerback coverage grades and passes defensed, and percentage of targets, completion rate when targeted. It's like 3rd in the NFL. It's just been so good, and it's good to see. Like, it's cool to see, right? This guy has been kind of like a journeyman. I think he's found a system that works for him, and he's going to go into free agency next year. And there's going to be a team out there that wants to play man-to-man cover corner, and he's going to get a 2-3 year deal, like a legit contract, and it's not going to be from the Saints. And people are going to get annoyed about it, but at the end of the day, it's just like,
they're going to get out the building, right?
Well, I mean, you're going to get a comp pick. Like, he's going to turn into a draft pick, right? So it's a win in the end for the Saints. But like, here's the thing: if you want to keep Ike Adam, are you going to trade Marshawn?
That gets all into then going into draft. 2024 draft, because then if there's going to be some wild package where this team wants to move up to get a quarterback, I think Alvin, Marshawn are your big ticket names that could be involved.
And this is a different conversation for another day, but
right, exactly.
You could definitely sell me on the idea that your best path forward is sign Ike Adam, extend Paulson Adebo and Pete Werner.
Sure.
Trade Marshawn for whatever for the assets that, like, you will get a lot for Marshawn. And it's like, I don't want him to trade Marshawn, but like, that's how you keep Ike Adam. If like you're someone that's like, I want to keep this guy around, it's because you did that. And that would be kind of a passive rebuild. And I think there would be some support behind the idea of doing that with, a guy who's, and honestly, it's like, if that's your path and you're like kind of saying we're kind of passively rebuilding, that would honestly be doing right by Marshawn in terms of like, he's a guy who could win right now if he's in the right team, and the Saints aren't ready. Anyway, that's another conversation for another day.
Obviously, any team's going to come calling for Marshawn. Everyone wants a top tier corner.
Yeah, I mean, cover, man-to-man defenses want that not everyone runs the same scheme. Like if you're a zone team, you're not looking for Marchand. Like he's not a zone corner. Anyway, that's again, I don't know why we're still talking about this. I've said multiple times, Steve. That's another conversation. Stop dragging me back in.
For another day. I'm sorry.
For the off season. That's the off season pod. Anyway. X factors on offense. Go.
I'm really looking at Kamara again in this matchup just because of the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty right now at the other running back position. I really don't know who's available other than him.
Yeah, Jamal Williams dealing with a groin injury. I think Jamal will be good to go. It doesn't seem significant. But
did he tweet that groin dancing?
People keep saying that. I don't know why people keep saying that. He was barely moving. He wasn't dancing. Not like he was doing some splits or like.
It's unfortunate. Obviously, we hadn't seen a lot from him this season. It kind of had like a little boost, and then you get a little bit of good news, and you get hit with some bad news with it.
I mean, everyone's dealing with something right now. Like that's the thing. Like landing on the injury report right now is a lot different from landing on the injury report in week 3, because like it's really just like. Okay, I need time to, like, and if you're limited in practice, and it's due to something, you have to list it, so and
what's really scary for this team too, after this, boom, Thursday night football.
Yeah. But that's why I think it was helpful to get through that Panthers game without any major additions to the injury report, right? Like, because the 2 games prior to that, the 3 games prior to that even, you just kept seeing body after body after body in that injury tent. It didn't even go up once.
Yeah, you mentioned that, right? So Olave didn't even need the tent last game with the ankle issue.
Brzee didn't go into the tent, although he did get treated on the field, but he didn't end up on the injury report.
Right.
So yeah, but I know there's a reason you brought in James Robinson. It's because you do have some guys. Obviously Kendray's availability is frustratingly not available, right? And then Jamal is dealing with that groin, so if it does keep him out or limits him in any way, you at least have a body who's played in an NFL game before, right? Unless you want to go with Jordan Mims, which is no shade on Jordan Mims. I wouldn't say he's a guy who is a top yield option, right? But
I would never see it coming.
It wouldn't. That is true. I think he's just here to be like roommates with Jay Kaner. I think it's like. Because they were teammates at Fresno State. That's why. But all right, so you're going with the running backs. I think that's fair. Again, like I think that 1-2 punch with Alvin and Jamal just hasn't been there, but it was last week, and it was nice to see. I look at Rashid. I think again, like that's the way I started this segment off with Rashid, is because I think he is the type of player that changes defenses. He forces defenses to play differently. And anytime you have a player that just being on the field forces a defense to adjust, that's a win for the offense, even if he's not being used. Like even just as a clear route, like he can do that in ways that no one else can. I also just like A.T. Perry. I like the idea of getting him involved downfield. I think one of the issues with A.T. Perry is it's already difficult to gain trust of the quarterback as a rookie, right? And when you're like, if the quarterback doesn't trust you, he's not throwing you the ball. He's not looking at you. And, I think that's just been a process for AT. And it was a process that was impacted heavily by you ran a play and the quarterback threw to a spot you were supposed to be in and you just didn't go there. And like, it's like, that's not helpful. Like you got to trust that guy in the moment, and I think that's building. And I thought that deep ball in that game against the Panthers, I think was a very, like he went and got that. It wasn't a bad throw, but it did require him to go run under it and get it. And he made that catch. There was a play against the Vikings that he had a chance to make a play over the middle of the field. And, he just wasn't secure enough with the ball. It got knocked out. He probably didn't have to leave his feet. I just think those are moments where it's like if you execute and like the quarterback trusts you to make that play, then you're going to get that opportunity again. And so I want to see him continue to build on that. But either way, like Rashid is just a dude. And I like him. He's a fun guy. I appreciate him. So
definitely happy to have that speed factor back because not having him was definitely pretty. Yeah, I think it was quite evident last game against the Panthers. You didn't have any threat deep down the field.
Yeah, and that's why, like, I asked Rashid about this because, it's like Chris Olave is basically the only guy on that offense in terms of a pass catcher that the Panthers had to account for, and that was the case against the Lions too. Like, and he's still making plays. Like their plan has to be, we're going to take him away, and he's still able to get open and make plays. And it's like he's just a different type of dude. Like when you're talking about a playmaker, a guy who can make things happen. And so when you do have weapons around him, and he's playing well right now, like that's what's frustrating is like I think earlier in the season he was kind of finding his way and he was struggling a little bit. Now he's playing well, but he's the only option. And I'd love to see a situation where you do have other options and they're not able to devote all of their energy to taking him away.
He fell into that last year in his rookie season and was able to power through. But you obviously want to see more of that artillery around him to see what else is capable of.
Yeah, and just having a guy like Rashid who can take a top off and force his defenses to account for him. And he can even outrun those coverages that are designed to take him away. He's that type of player. So that's my pick. But either way, I think a lot of this season is going to come down to this week. Because if you can win it and you can keep the positive vibes rolling and you can go out to LA, it feels like, okay, you got something here. If you can't, I think you're back to square one. And they're just going to hear all the negative stuff all over again. So I just think this team has a lot riding on this game, and they got to go out and show up. And it's like, honestly, I don't even care how it looks. Go win a game. I'm tired of this like beauty contest thing. Go win a game.
Yeah, I'll take whatever. And we got to root for Carolina this week. They're hosting Atlanta, and then what is it? The Bucks are at Green Bay.
Yeah, I could see the Bucks losing. I'm not spending an ounce of my time considering that the Panthers might find a way to go win that game. I'm sorry, I'm just not doing it. It's not worth my energy. They're that bad.
My hopes are high just because this season has been wild. One of the craziest NFL seasons I can remember, and I truly believe any week anything is possible.
Who did they beat?
The Texans.
They beat the Texans. I bet after that week, everyone was like, "Oh man, the Texans drafted the wrong quarterback." Anyway, but all right. That's it. It's going to wrap it up for this episode of Inside Black and Gold. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks, everyone who got all the way to the end. It's been a journey. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow Steve at Steve Geller WWL. We are getting ready for the third consecutive game in the Caesars Superdome. Weird.
That, and then, like I said, short turnaround. Boom. Thursday, you're in LA, brother.
Sure am. And you can check us out starting at 8 a.m. on Sunday on First Take, the pregame show to the pregame show. I know everyone loves that. It's been fun.
From the bowels of the dome when no one else is in there.
I wouldn't say the bowels. It's the second floor, so it's kind of like the intestines of the dome.
Yeah, it's almost like I feel like Phantom of the Opera kind of thing because there's just no one else around and the echo of us talking.
Yeah, it's just us and the people practicing for the anthem and whatnot. Yes. Right? Whatever high school marching band is going to be there at halftime. That's it. Yeah, it's funny when I was actually, when I was standing out in the parking lot to come in, I had to wait because the Edna Car marching band had just gotten dropped off. And so there was only one exit to the parking lot that we're in. Right. And it was like, I had to stand there for 10 minutes as the entire marching band filed through. This is how the bacon gets made, or the sausage.
Right. It's like, excuse me, pardon me, got to get through.
Well, I kind of just stood there and waited because I was like, I don't want to end. Like they got a whole snake thing going, because they weren't just walking in a group; they were walking in like 2x2s, because that's just what marching bands do. They do it. But all right, it's Saints Giants on Sunday. Everyone keeps asking me who I'm rooting for. It says I'm rooting for me to have a good time. That's what I'm rooting for. I can't I don't root for, I was actually annoyed when the Giants won. People say wow, you're going to be rooting for the Giants. It was like, well, I did wonder in my brain how that was going to register when the Giants came here in 2021. And I will tell you that I was annoyed as hell that the Saints lost that game. Not even because I cared about the Giants or I cared about the Saints. It's really a pain in the ass when the result seems finished and you kind of get everything prepared as if it's done. And then all of a sudden,
you had your lines written.
Like, that's annoying to me. I don't care that the Giants won. A lot of times I'll watch the Giants and root for the Giants. I don't care that the Saints lost in terms of like, yeah, okay, that sucks, but whatever. Like, I care about me. I am a very selfish person when it comes to my lifestyle, and and that annoyed me personally. So that's who I'm rooting for in this game. I'm rooting for me.
I laugh too. Folks ask me a lot too when it comes to Eagles stuff with the Saints. And to me, I am rooting for the Saints. You know why? The Saints play more games, get into the postseason. That means more money for me. So I'm all about that.
Yeah. And also, like, it's more fun to cover a team that's winning.
A little bit.
And again, like I say this, like my work life and having a good time doing what I do for a living is more important to me than that team that I grew up watching. Is that bad?
No, not at all. Because fandom's just different now that we're old men.
Yeah, if I didn't work covering the team,
right,
I'd probably have a different answer for you. Like, I would be more conflicted. But like, yeah, like this team going to the playoffs means I get to go cover a playoff game. So I'm always going to end up on that end. So don't worry. I'll be right there with you, annoyed if the Saints lose.
Jeff is cheering more than the fans booing.
Yeah, there are people in that stadium who are going to be rooting for the Giants, but it won't be me.
Right.
All right. But let's wrap this up. Thanks everyone again for listening. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, do that. If you're not following us on YouTube, why the hell not? Hey, ring the bell, WWL Sports. Follow us on Twitter at Saints_pod. Hit up WWL.com. Hit up WWL.com for the latest news, notes, and analysis. Who dat? Go Saints.
They better be that.
Yes, sir. Be easy, y'all. Peace.